transformational leaders our country has ever experienced. Martin Luther King Jr. led America on a civil rights journey that has changed the way people think and behave. He was a moral leader who stood up for the rights of every human being and left us a legacy that we all must continue to remember and celebrate. I am extremely excited. Our speaker today marks right in step with Martin Luther King Jr. in a very dangerous but inspiring time in our history. He was shot at. He was jailed, all for the cause of civil rights. Attorney Armand Derfner is a litigator who specializes in class actions, especially in the areas of labor, employment, and consumer law. He has been practicing civil rights law for over 40 years. He has argued civil rights cases before the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court, 5 times. He won all 5 times. He is no stranger to us, as both of his sons are Porter-Gaud alumni. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Armand Derfner.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Okay. Well, it's great to be here. As I was telling Mr. Pearson, I have not been here in a number of years and have never been in this gym. But I did spend time in the other gym watching my boys play when they were here at Porter-Gaud. It's especially good to be here talking at a time when we're honoring Dr. King and looking back and I hope looking forward. Because in the long time that I've been alive, which is more than I care to think about, a lot has happened, but we have a lot more to go, and that's where you come in. First, a little history lesson. This country has had, we think of our revolution, we've really had 3 revolutions at least. The first was what we call the American Revolution, when we became free of the British and formed our own country. The problem was that revolution in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, and 1787 with the Constitution that formed a new nation. That revolution was incomplete because what we did was to fasten in it the sickness of slavery. It was like a wound that you cover over, and it just festered and festered. We had a second revolution. It's the Civil War and the period after that, where we ended slavery, passed the 14th and 15th Amendment, and really formed a new nation. It was a new birth of liberty, or it was supposed to be that. The problem is that although we had the structure, and we said people are free and people are equal, it really wasn't so. And again, led by some of our people here in this state, we resisted. And so instead of getting a new birth of freedom in a real way, we embarked on 100 years of Jim Crow. And so the second revolution really didn't go very far. The third revolution really began with Brown versus the Board of Education, Supreme Court case in 1954, which in turn actually began in 1950 in downtown Charleston with the Clarendon County School desegregation case, and with the role of Judge Waiters Waring and Thurgood Marshall, and eventually Brown versus the Board. That began the third revolution, in which we swept away the laws that created a divided nation. We had a country that was strictly divided, a country of segregation and white supremacy, a country in which back of the bus really meant back of the bus. People now, especially young people, think that must be a metaphor. Imagine the city of Charleston with 200 restaurants downtown. Imagine a situation in which blacks could not be served in any one of those, in which blacks could not be served in a motel, driving along the road. Those were the most obvious things, but also blacks were not voting, serving on juries, kept out of most jobs, and the whole system was kept in force by violence, murder, lynchings. In Charleston, we had a municipal golf course. Even after the decision of Brown versus Board of Education, the course was kept segregated. What did that mean? Whites played on the golf course 364 days a year, but blacks were allowed to play there on Christmas Day on the theory that white people were home. Why is the crosstown where it is? Well, because the blocks around there used to be a thriving black neighborhood. And when it came time to put a highway downtown and needing a way to get from east to west, the easiest and cheapest way was simply to displace blacks. Because if you need a parkway, well, they've got to move. They had to move on the bus. They might as well have to move their homes. So that's the situation we had in this city and in this country. It's kind of hard to understand from this distance the kind of world it was and how rigidly it was kept in place so that anybody who dared to cross the line was likely to suffer, whether suffer financially, suffer by being beat up, or worse, killed, etc. But that's the world we had, and that was the legacy we had from our ancestors. When I talk to young people and see young people, I think of how we try and we are working to make sure that the burdens we carry from our past will somehow not be passed on to you and the people that you know. So that's the country we had at the beginning of the Third Revolution, and that's about where I came in. I was in high school when the Brown versus Board decision came down. I remember walking along the street, and my friend Jerry came running down and said, "The Supreme Court threw segregation out." I had a sense of what that was, not too strong a sense, but I knew it was a big deal. But it was pretty abstract for me. Eventually I went off to college and law school, and after law school I went to Washington, D.C. And by that time, we were in the early 1960s, and there was really a revolution brewing. When I first got to Washington, it was the time of the March on Washington in 1863. Dr. King was there. He gave his famous speech, "I Have a Dream." Things were really beginning to change rapidly. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1864. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1865. Then I joined the revolution. I went to Mississippi. I spent some years there, living there, and I've been involved in cases there and other civil rights cases since that time. And, I argued cases in the U.S. Supreme Court. I also tried cases in magistrates' court. And I remember in magistrates' court, I remember one time a case in Cleveland, Mississippi, trying the case in the magistrates' court room, which was the back of his garage. He didn't know how to read and write, but he was white. That's all he needed to be a judge. He also had a gun sitting on the table right here. And that was all he needed to be a judge. So where are we now? The Third Revolution, the one that began with Brown versus Board, we think we did a lot. We, a lot of other people, and I put in my little bit. Dr. King was a huge figure in that. But also young people like you, high school, even below high school, junior high school, were marching, were taking stands, both black and white people, in making changes. And we created the notion of first-class citizenship for everyone as an ideal, And that meant not just for black people, who were the principal target, who had been the slaves, but others as well. In that same period, that the civil rights movement for blacks also created a notion, well, there ought to be real opportunities for women. Women shouldn't be second-class citizens. The same thing for other people, other racial groups. So it was a time when the civil rights movement, although focusing mostly or specifically on African Americans, really became a time in which the ideal of first-class citizens for everybody was really recognized. So there's still a long way to go. And that our generation think we moved the ball. But we only moved the ball so far. And we're looking, what I'll call my generation, are looking to you to really move the ball. William Wordsworth, the English poet, and some of you are savage with Wordsworth in English class. Wordsworth went to France early in the days of the French Revolution. And he wrote a long poem about it. And there's a line in the poem that every revolutionary has always looked to. It's a favorite of mine. I've heard it from people who work with the New Deal. It's not just the property of one particular political idea, because I've also heard it from people who worked in the early days of President Reagan's administration. Wordsworth said about the French Revolution, the youth of it, bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. I've never forgotten those words, and I'm looking forward. I may not be here. I'm looking forward 60 years from now, when some of you will be talking to the class of 2074, and talking about how you got a society that was part finished